Hi everyone, welcome to episode 7 of Sketch Support. If you are a new viewer, Sketch Support is a series I create and share here on YouTube and on my website, AllisonDavis4SG.com. This series is all about how to use and adapt scrapbook sketches. I show you how adaptable sketches are by taking one sketch and creating multiple layout examples, all based on that same sketch, with each layout looking completely different than the others. It's a fun approach to using sketches, and it really proves just how flexible they are. If you want to see future videos, make sure you go ahead and hit subscribe. This month, I am working with a new free one-page sketch that you can download at scrapbookgeneration.com. And there's also another 3-page PDF with 23 more sketch examples, all based on this one sketch. I'll link to both of those in the video description down below. I've created 5 layouts from this sketch that I'll be showing you as I talk through the ways I adapted the sketch to work with my photos, the supplies I had on hand, and the theme of my layout. There is a wide range of themes and elements within my layout, from bubbles to music to giant stars and balloons, and of course, my favorite, splashes for a water-themed layout. I'm going to continue the Sketch Support Challenge and the $20 sketch giveaway. The details for that are in the description down below of this video. Each month, there are more and more people participating, so we're just going to keep on doing this. It's a lot of fun. I think eventually we might have to start a sketch group or something so it's easier to go back to previous months and see all of the layouts. I'll have to think on that for a little bit and see what I can come up with. So let's jump right in with a look at the sketch that I have used as the starting point to create the 5 layouts in this video. There are 3 main elements on this sketch that I focused on adapting to fit my needs: the background pieces, the photos, and then these horizontal strips that have stars in varying sizes at the right end of them. The stars can easily be swapped out for many different shapes, like hearts or circles or whatever fits your theme or design idea. You'll see me use 5 different elements for those with my layouts. One thing I love about this sketch is that it's one that you can rotate and get completely different looks and easily custom fit it to different themes. If I were to rotate it like this so that the strips are above the photos, I like to think about different themes that would have things going upwards or standing. Things like flowers with stems or birthday candles or houses. If you were to rotate it so that the strips are below the photos, you can play around with different themes that have things going downward or dropping. Things like Christmas ornaments or falling leaves or snowflakes. Each rotation of this sketch can give you a new look. If you are new to Scrapbook Generation sketches, I want to point out a few details on our sketches that can be very helpful when you want to create with one of these. On our one-page sketches, over on the right side, we have a little section that gives you the measurements of each piece on the sketch, so there's no guesswork involved on trying to figure that out. It's all right here for you. We also include the placement of certain details to help you get the elements in the right position. There isn't a placement for every detail, just the ones that are most needed to get you started. Then below, you'll find a few additional directions that give some optional suggestions of things you can add to your layout, like stitching or using foam adhesive on certain pieces. So now that we've had a closer look at the sketch, let's jump right into the first layout based on this sketch. If there is a way to be close yet far away, this layout would be that. The first change I made was removing the background pieces. I had this image in my head of creating a wet looking background. You know how when your kids are blowing bubbles and you look at the ground beneath them and it's covered in the splattered remains of all the popped bubbles? I was trying to kind of recreate that look on my layout with watercolors. I tried out the smooshing technique for the first time. This is where you put your watercolor or inks on a piece of plastic and then smash it down on your paper. I've seen it mostly used with inks and then water is spritzed on it and then smooshed, but I just started with dabbing some watercolor right on the plastic and went for it. I used the packaging from a set of stamps that I had. What I like about this is that it creates a unique spread of watercolor. It was just a fun technique to kind of try out. I've seen it done a few times and I was just kind of in the mood to play with this one. I can see myself experimenting with it definitely more, especially using multiple colors. I felt like it was an easier way to get a more random look without having to paint it all by hand. Plus, it was a lot faster to get this background design than doing it by hand with a brush. I also added a few sprays and splatters of watercolor by dipping my brush in the watercolor and using my hand to flick it all over the design. Now that I had this watercolor background, I wanted to add some bubbles on top of it. I used my go-to Nuvo Jewel Drops in Sea Breeze and some glossy accents to create some dimensional, translucent bubbles onto the background. For the larger bubbles, I used a circle stencil to help me get that uniform circle shape. I placed the stencil down, squeezed out the Nuvo drops to fill the whole circle, and then carefully lifted the stencil off the paper. And because Nuvo drops and glossy accents hold their shape, it made creating these really easy. The stencil was just a precaution to kind of help me get that uniform circle shape. For my photo, I used a 4x6 inch photo in place of the two 5x3 inch photos you see on the sketch. This photo and the photos on the sketch have the same height of 6 inches. For the width, my photo is lacking an inch, but accommodating that was super easy. All I had to do was add a little bit more length to my horizontal strips. Anytime you have less photos than what you see on a sketch, you can always combine two photos into one. It's just an easy solution to making a sketch work for what you have. I replaced the stars on the sketch with circles. I wanted to create bubbles to match my photo. I used a variety of pattern papers and then used my silhouette to cut them into bubbles. I used a mix of different pattern papers throughout and then used one pattern in this white all over. I wanted the white ones to really stand out and take on the appearance of bubbles, so I covered them in glossy accents to give them that sheen that makes them look almost wet, like an actual bubble. At first glance, this layout looks quite a bit different than the sketch, but really it follows a lot of the same details. It's just customized to fit my photos and theme. A lot of times when I want to follow the sketch design, but find ways to make it my own, and this is the approach I took with this layout, it's all about taking elements on a sketch as a suggestion, not an exact detail that you have to follow. I look at a sketch and see things in areas, and those areas are flexible. The photos are in this area, the strips are in this area, the stars are in this area, the background pieces are in this area. So no matter what I use, as long as I stay in that same general area, I'm still following that sketch design while making it my own, and I don't have to worry about making major adjustments to make it work. I can use different sizes or amount of photos, but as long as I stay in the same general area as the photos on the sketch, it works. I can use wavy strips instead of straight strips as long as they are in the same general area as the strips on the sketch, it works. It's like a safe way to stretch your creativity without taking a huge risk. It's using a sketch design, but making it your own. For this layout, I had three 3x3-inch photos that I wanted to use. The photos do have a much smaller width than the photos on the sketch, but I was able to overlap and arrange them in a way that still fits and covers close to the same area as the photos on the sketch do. This worked out perfectly because the wavy lines of music were quite large, so this opened up a little more space for those. I knew right away when I picked out these photos that I wanted to have music flourishes in place of the horizontal strips and stars. Thankfully, I found some of these in the Silhouette Design Store that were very close to what I had in my head of what I wanted to create here. They really made this easy for me. I used 3 different flourishes grouped together to create this big design of music going across the page. There is this big one in the middle and then 2 smaller ones above and below that large one. Because there are music notes all throughout the design, I didn't feel like it needed much embellishing beyond that, so I kept it pretty simple on that end. I added some black glitter to a few of the notes and some tiny stars throughout the design. It was like I took the stars and strips on the sketch and mashed them together. To continue this music theme around the photos, I used a mixture of these hand die cuts, some star die cuts, more of the music notes, and a few pieces cut from pattern paper like the stars and this guitar. I like to add different detail and texture to different elements when I have everything grouped together like this to help them each stand out individually while still being a cohesive cluster. I added some stitching to the cutout stars and then some black glitter to the die cut stars and the music notes. For my background, I wanted to have kind of a grungy look to go with my rocking out theme. So I used a stencil and some black ink to add this star design to the top left corner and the bottom right corner. Then I had this fun decorative edged pattern paper that had music notes all over it. It's a pretty old paper. I think I've had it in my stash for a very long time. I couldn't even begin to tell you how long. I really loved the look of it. I loved the glitter edge, the design of the edge, and the fact that it had music all over it. But I didn't think it would work for my whole background. So instead, I cut off about 1.25 inches off the top and bottom of the paper and used them in place of the smaller 1/4 inch horizontal strips that are above and below the background piece. I had to go with bigger strips to get both the decorative glitter edge and the music notes. There's 2 inches of space above and below the background piece, so there's plenty of space to add a little more without having to change anything for it to fit. I kept my title and journaling close to the same area it is on the sketch. I did change the journaling format. Instead of the block like you see on the sketch, I used journaling strips. Journaling strips are my favorite journaling format, so I tend to use them often. They did seem like kind of a better fit for this design because I could mold and wrap the strips around different elements on my layout. So I wasn't covering up too much of this flourish design. What's funny about this layout is that it looks so different from the sketch, but really a lot of the same elements are there. They are just customized. There are also things that have been removed and things that have been added. This time I had 4 3x3-inch photos that I wanted to use. I arranged them together in a square that covers very close to the same amount of space as the 2 photos on the sketch. Again, it's staying close to the same general area. The 2 photos on the sketch combined cover a 5x6-inch space, and these 4 photos cover a 6x6-inch space. It's only an inch of difference, plus the photos are somewhat overlapped, so you don't have to make big adjustments for it to work. I also added in a few photo frames instead of using the photo mat on the sketch. I liked the fun and playful look of these frames and how it fit with the silly faces in the photos. The biggest and more noticeable change is this background piece. I used a set of 3 large stars layered together in place of the background on the sketch. This is one of my favorite ways to really get a different look out of a sketch. Any large background can be swapped out for a large shape, or if there isn't a large background, you can usually add a large shape in there somewhere. Playing with shape backgrounds is so much fun. Definitely one of my favorite things to do to get a completely different look. I needed the star to be large enough that you could still see it behind the photos, so I stretched it really big, and there are a few points of the star that go off the layout. To add a little bit of texture, I added a hand-stitched border on the top star. I ended up removing all of the horizontal strips. I kept the stars, but thought it would be fun to have a huge cluster of them on the right edge of the star background. It still follows that design of stars at the end of the strips. It's just been changed to the ends of the large star instead. I have 2 different groupings of stars to create this look. One is on the top edge of the star, and the second one is tucked under the large star. I added stitching to the bigger stars on the top side, and then on the bottom side used star frames. Then I filled in the rest of the design with small stars and these 3 star pieces. I loved this black and white stripe on the photo frame, and it really made me like the addition of black and white to the blue and green color scheme. I never would have thought to add black and white had it not been for this photo frame. It inspired me to work in some more black and white to the whole layout. I first added this star background paper, then I added some black and white stripe strips to the outer edge of the white cardstock paper. And again, I changed up the journaling format. I told you guys that journaling strips are definitely my favorite. I liked that I could shape my journaling to fit around these stars. With this layout, I ended up rotating the sketch. I did this for 2 reasons. One, I wanted the strips to be above the photos because I wanted to customize the design to fit my theme. And 2, I had vertical photos instead of the horizontal photos on the sketch. Anytime you want a different look out of a sketch, rotate it. With most sketches, you can get 4 different looks just from rotating it and using each angle. This is a great way to really stretch a sketch and get the most out of it. When I see vertical strips, I think about things that you would see going up or down. In this case of the sketch, to me, when you rotate it so that the strips are above the photos, I envision things that would go upwards like balloons or flowers with stems or birthday candles or maybe even Christmas trees. There are so many themes that you could play around with when you think of strips in that way. I wanted to create balloons that coordinate with my photos, so I created this giant arrangement of die-cut balloons along the top of my layout. These are all in place of the stars that you see on the sketch. Then I used hand-stitched lines in place of these strips. To add a little more detail to the design, I added some confetti and streamers along the bottom of the balloons, and then there are a few balloon animals just for fun. I used 5 2x4" photos in place of the 2 5x3" photos on the sketch and stretched them to fit from the left edge and the right edge. Because there isn't really anything above and below the 2 photos on the sketch, you have plenty of room to add in more photos to those areas if you want to, and you don't have to worry about adjusting anything in order for them to fit. I removed the background because I really wanted to highlight the balloons, and I liked the white on white stitching and cardstock. I knew that I wanted to use white embroidery floss, and I wanted it to stand out while also being a more subtle detail, if that makes any sense at all. I was afraid a pattern paper there would take away from that detail. I decided to keep the 1/4" strips, and I added them to the left and right edges of the layout. It's almost like if you were to look at the sketch, it's like I've taken all of these middle elements and blown them up to fit the whole layout. I ended up using a 3x4 card for my title. It fit in so well with my arrangement of photos that I really couldn't resist using it there. Sometimes little cards make life so much easier. Title arrangement and design can be kind of a difficult process sometimes, so using a card instead can be a nice relief from that. I moved my journaling to fit just above that title card. I don't always do it, but most of the time I do like to place my title and journaling together. They are both important pieces of the layout, and I like that I can use them both to bring attention to each other. If you guys know me, you know that I'm going to have at least one layout that is water related. I seriously can't help myself. It is always sketch support tradition to create a 2-page layout from the 1-page sketch or vice versa. I will say it over and over, and if you've watched any of my previous videos, you have heard it before. I never let the size of the sketch determine the size of my layout. When you get a new sketch, there are always ways to adjust and stretch and decrease, extend, or shrink the sketch to make it work on a different size of layout. You have so many possibilities with just one sketch. The 3-page PDF of bonus sketches is proof of that. This month, there are 23 different sketch examples, all based on this one sketch. That means you could make 24 layouts from this one sketch, with each one looking so different. To go from a 1-page sketch to a 2-page layout, I extended the photos and stretched the papers to fit onto a 2-page layout. To create this look, I rotated elements on the sketch. I know I've shown and talked about rotating a sketch a lot, but this is a little bit different. Usually I'm talking about rotating the whole sketch. This time I'm only talking about rotating two elements on the sketch, the photos and the strips with the star design. The best way I can explain this is imagine that you grab the photos on the sketch with your left hand and the strips and stars with your right hand. Then you rotate them clockwise until the photos are above the strips and the strips are going from left to right across the page. Think of a Ferris wheel at a carnival and how as it rotates around, the buckets with the passengers stay in the same position as the wheel rotates. I used that same concept when rotating the elements on this sketch. I took these two elements and rotated them without changing their direction. I decided to rotate this way so that I could include more photos to showcase this action sequence going across the layout, while also having my strips go all the way across the layout with a big splash on the right page. I had 6 4x6 photos that I wanted to use for this design. The 6-inch height matches the combined 6-inch height of the photos on the sketch, so it was an easy solution. Plus, they fit perfectly across the whole layout since I had rotated the elements and have my strips along the bottom. I also added a white photo mat to 3 of the photos. The photos are all very similar, so I wanted to break that up just a little to have each photo edge stand out. I created several wavy strips to use in place of the strips on the sketch. They are layered on top of each other, and then I added a hand-stitched border along the top edge. Instead of the stars, I created a large splash design. I wanted it to almost look like an extension of the splash in the photos. I started off with this super cute splash die cut that I got at the Silhouette Design Store. It was the center of this design. Then I added some layered die cut flourishes to create the big splash. To complete the look, I added in some water droplets. As a final detail, I used a Wink of Stella glimmer brush to go over the white cardstock pieces. The glimmer and glitter never really translates well in video, but if you could see it in person, it's really sparkly and pretty. To complete the look, I added my journaling strips just below the title. That brings us to the end of Sketch Support, episode 7. Don't forget about the Sketch Support challenge and giveaway. The details for that are in the video description, and I really hope to see lots of layouts again this month. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.